Welcome to your deep dive. Today, we're warping into the Warhammer 40K universe.
To the Tau Empire.
Yeah, the Tau Empire. You sent us this awesome YouTube video about them.
Yeah, breaking down their whole deal, their history and philosophy, and even
some table-type tactics, all that.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to be focusing on today. We're not just going to, rehash the video. We're going for, the juicy bits.
It's good stuff.
The stuff that makes the Tau stand out, you know. In a universe where it's all grim dark, pretty much.
Almost jarring, right? Like, everybody's kind of terrible.
Yeah.
And then you got the Tau. And they're, surprisingly optimistic.
Right.
Some fans even call them the good guys of 40K.
Yeah.
Which, I gotta admit, at first I was like, wait, what?
That's a very human reaction.
Yeah.
We always want to put things in these neat little boxes.
Right.
You know, good versus evil.
Yeah.
But 40K does not make it easy.
Oh, no.
It really throws a wrench in that whole thing.
For sure.
The video even compares the Tau to Mother Teresa at one point.
Wow. Okay.
Which is a pretty bold statement.
It is, yeah. And I think that's where it gets really interesting, the Tau make us rethink what morality even means.
Absolutely.
Especially in a universe as brutal as, Warhammer 40K.
Because it's not only sunshine and rainbows with them, is it?
Right.
The video does point out, there's some stuff they do that's not so squeaky clean. Re-education camps, there's hints of mind control.
Yeah.
Treating other races as, second-class citizens.
Oh, yeah.
It's a mixed bag, for sure.
It definitely complicates things. Makes you wonder if it's even possible to be good.
Right.
In a place where, survival might mean compromising your ideals a bit.
Yeah. Where do you draw the line? What's actually acceptable, even if you're aiming for this greater good, supposedly?
Yeah, it's a tough question.
And the Tau, they really make us face that head on. They're not just a faction. They're like a whole philosophical thought experiment.
Oh, I like that.
Wrapped up in battle suits and holding pulse rifles.
Yeah. And speaking of which, their rise to power is just insane.
Right.
Stone Age to a star-spanning empire in, 6,000 years? That's basically overnight.
In galactic terms, yeah. It took humanity, around that same time to get to ancient Egypt.
Crazy, right?
So the Tau, they're like the ultimate speedrunners of galactic civilization.
It almost feels too fast. It makes you wonder if they really did it all themselves.
Well, that's caused some debate. Some folks, like the Eldar, think the Tau just weren't creative enough to pull that off.
Ah.
They see them more as imitators than innovators.
I can see that.
But the video pushes back on that pretty hard. Take how they analyze the Codex Astartes.
Oh, yeah, the Space Marines process.
Basically, it lays out all their tactics and strategies. For the Tau to not only grasp that, but actually use it in their own way. That says a lot about their strategic thinking.
Yeah, and then there's their fights against the Tyranids.
Ah, yes. The ultimate adaptation test.
Right. They were figuring out the Tyranids' whole hive mind thing, changing tactics on the fly.
That's not just copying, that's genuine ingenuity.
Maybe the Eldar are just,
A little jealous.
A little, yeah. Getting shown up by the new kids on the block, it's gotta sting.
I guess so. But this whole rapid advancement thing, it ties into their philosophy too, doesn't it?
The greater good.
Yeah.
When I first heard about it, I was like, wait, are these guys space communists?
Laughs. That comparison comes up a lot, and
yeah.
Honestly, there are some parallels. The Tau have their caste system, they're big on meritocracy, and the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few.
For sure. And another thing that just blew my mind, the video talks about how they don't seem to have resource problems, at all.
It's crazy.
They've somehow built a society that actually works and is sustainable. In 40K, that's unheard of.
It's one of the most fascinating things about them, and maybe one of the scariest. They're like a glimpse into what a utopia could be. But then the question becomes, what did it cost them?
Right.
The video gets into that too. Loss of individual freedoms, the potential for the ethereals to manipulate everyone.
The ethereals, those mysterious leaders.
Exactly. And that whole danger of putting the group above the individual.
It makes you think, could we handle that kind of system in the real world? Would we be willing to give up some of our freedom for a society where there's no poverty, no war?
It's a question worth thinking about. But even with their seemingly perfect society, the Tuon's invincible, not by a long shot. The video makes that very clear.
Yeah.
They're like a guppy in a tank full of sharks.
Yikes. Okay, that paints a pretty vivid picture. They're surrounded by these ancient, terrifying empires. The Imperium, Chaos, Tyranids. How have they lasted this long? It's almost a miracle.
It is. Which brings us to another big question.
Yeah.
How are they holding their own against these galactic giants?
Seriously, it's kind of mind-blowing. You have these, like, ancient empires, right?
Yeah.
Millennia of warfare, unimaginable power, and the Tells are like the new kids.
Yeah.
And they're standing up to them. How are they doing it? What's their secret?
Well, it's not one secret, really.
Oh,
it's more like a whole bunch of things working together.
Okay.
The video goes depth on their military stuff, and it's actually surprisingly realistic. For 40K, I mean...
They're not just charging in for, like, glorious melee combat.
Right.
Like some of the other,
factions.
Yeah. They actually care about strategy and minimizing casualties.
Exactly. They get it. Economies of scale, force multiplication. It's refreshing, you know?
Yeah.
In a setting where everyone else seemed to love pointless bloodshed.
It's like they actually read a history book or two.
Right.
And applied it to their tactics.
Exactly.
And this translates to the tabletop too, right? Like, from what I got from the video, the Tau are all about controlling the battlefield.
Oh, yeah. They are the kings of ranged combat.
King of the shooting gallery.
Absolutely. Their basic infantry weapon, the pulse rifle, it's statistically one of the best in the game.
I can see that.
And then you got stuff like the hammerhead gunship.
Oh, yeah.
You can just delete enemy armor. And the railgun.
Okay, the railgun, I've heard about this.
It's like a sniper rifle on steroids. Takes out the toughest targets with one shot.
A sniper rifle that ignores invulnerable saves. Come on, that's just not fair.
It's pretty brutal. Turns any fight into target practice, basically.
Sounds like it. But there's got to be a downside, right? What happens when the enemy closes in?
Yes, that's the Tau's weak spot. They're not built for brawls.
Okay.
The video's up front about that. Their infantry's fragile.
Makes sense.
And even their battle suits, as cool as they are, they're not meant for hand-to-hand.
Classic glass cannon.
Exactly. Hit hard, but shatter if someone gets too close.
I feel that.
And this whole thing is made even worse by their reliance on marker lights.
The marker. Okay, those are more than just laser pointers, right?
Way more. Think of it like a super advanced battlefield awareness system.
Okay, now that's cool. So it's not just about aiming better.
Nope. Each marker light that hits, it feeds data back to their whole network.
So they're getting a clearer picture of the battlefield with every shot.
Exactly. That's how they concentrate their firepower so effectively. But if you lose those marker light sources, your firepower drops hard.
High risk, high reward.
Exactly. You got to keep those marker light units safe.
It's like trying to keep your comms up in a firefight so you can call in support.
Perfect analogy. It adds this whole extra layer of strategy to playing Tau.
Yeah, you can't just charge in.
Nope. You got to think about positioning, flanking, overlapping fields of fire.
To protect your marker lights.
Exactly. It's definitely a faction that rewards a strategic mind, which I appreciate.
Yeah, same here. Okay, but what about the units themselves? Any standouts that really show off what the Tau can do?
Oh, for sure. We mentioned the hammerhead. That's a classic.
With a flying tank.
Basically, it's mobile, it hits like a truck, and you can customize it with all sorts of weapons.
I like options. And the railgun. That thing still sounds insane.
Oh, the railgun is the Tau's answer to anything big and scary.
Yeah.
Ignores invulnerable saves. That's a game changer. Imagine, one shot takes down a Space Marine captain, maybe even a demon.
Whoa. I'm getting chills just thinking about it.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
But we've been talking a lot about ranged firepower.
Right, because they're not exactly melee monsters.
Yeah, that's where their allies come in. The video talks about the Kroot.
The Kroot, aren't they those bird-like creatures?
Yeah. Known for being fierce and adaptable.
They're the ones that evolve based on what they eat, right?
That's them. Eat a tough enemy, you get tougher yourself. Kind of creepy.
A little.
But also tactically interesting.
Yeah, no kidding.
But the video does point out, like, while the Kroot and other Tau allies, they can hold their own in melee.
Yeah.
They do have their limits.
So it's a trade-off.
Exactly.
You get some melee punch, but maybe you lose some overall power or synergy.
Right. It's about finding the right mix.
Always a balancing act. Okay, but let's zoom out a bit. We've got this picture of the Tau, right? Advanced tech, unique philosophies, strong military.
Right.
But they're still a small empire surrounded by enemies. So how do they stack up against the other big players in the galaxy?
That's the million-dollar question. And the video dives right into it. The Damocles Gulf Crusade is a good example.
Okay, admit it, I'm not totally up on all the lore details. Damocles Gulf Crusade, refresh my memory.
Sure. Basically, it was the Imperium's first real try at conquering the Tau.
Oh, wow, okay.
It was brutal. Went on for years.
Yeah.
Some of the Imperium's heaviest hitters were involved.
So how'd it go? Did the Imperium just steamroll them?
Not quite. The Tau did lose the campaign, had to give up some land,
Makes sense.
but they inflicted huge casualties on the Imperium.
Wow. Okay.
And they proved that they weren't messing around.
They weren't just going to roll over.
Exactly. They made the Imperium bleed for every inch. The Damocles Gulf Crusade proved they can stand up to the big guys, even if they are a young empire.
That's impressive. But they were fighting the Imperium,
Right.
known for being stubborn.
Oh, yeah.
Not great with new ideas.
And their tech is ancient. But what about something like chaos? That's a whole different beast.
Right. Demons and warping reality, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. The video doesn't downplay how dangerous chaos is. They're described as like pure entropy, just trying to corrupt and devour everything.
That's terrifying. How do you even fight that?
That's the question, isn't it? It's been plaguing the galaxy forever.
Yeah.
And the Tau, with their whole logic and reason thing, they struggle to even understand chaos.
Makes sense. They're like oil and water.
Exactly. The video also points out how the Tau's optimism, their belief that the universe is inherently good,
Yeah.
it can backfire on them.
Like they're trying to beat back a nightmare with, I don't know, science and diplomacy.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Their tech and tactics, they work great against normal enemies.
Right. But chaos is anything but normal.
Exactly. So they're definitely fighting an uphill battle there. But what about the Tyranids?
The Nids, those extragalactic bugs that just eat everything.
The ultimate eating machine.
How do the Tau stand against them?
Well, the Tyranids are a threat to everyone, right?
Oh, for sure.
And the Tau know it.
Yeah, they've managed to fight them off a few times.
They have. But a full-on invasion, that would be catastrophic for them.
The video called the Tyranids a galactic buffet table, which is, I don't know, horrifyingly accurate.
Laughs. Kind of is. But even if they can hold their own against these individual threats,
Yeah.
don't they kind of lack the big guns that other factions have?
We're talking planet-killing lasers, reality-bending artifacts, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. The Tau, they just don't have access to that level of firepower.
So it's like they're bringing a knife to a gunfight, and everyone else has a nuke.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. That could be a big problem for them down the line.
Sounds like they're constantly on the edge.
They are. But even with all that, there's something about the Tau that makes you root for them.
Yeah.
They're trying to build something better.
Yeah.
They're willing to learn, to adapt.
Yeah.
They're facing impossible odds, but they're doing it with, like, this crazy amount of courage.
And tenacity.
Exactly. Their story is proof that hope can exist, even in the darkest places.
And that's what makes them so interesting. Okay, we've covered a lot.
We have?
Their philosophy, their tech, the terrifying stuff they're up against.
Yeah.
But before we get into their tabletop tactics
Yeah.
and the whole, will they survive question,
The big one.
I just gotta say, it's amazing that in a universe like 40K, where everything is kind of stuck in decaying,
Yeah.
the Tau represent progress.
And hope.
They believe in a better future.
It's a nice change of pace, isn't it?
It really is.
They're a beacon of light in all that darkness. And their fight to survive. It's
Yeah.
something we can all find inspiring.
It's funny, we've been like neck deep in this Tau stuff.
Yeah.
And they're almost like inspiring.
Really?
Yeah. It's like they should be doomed, right?
Yeah.
In the Warhammer 40K universe,
Oh, absolutely.
they're up against stuff most people wouldn't even understand.
Yeah.
But they just keep going,
Right.
adapting, believing in their greater good. It's almost hopeful,
Hopeful.
which is not a word I use lightly when we're talking 40K.
No, not at all. It's true, though. They don't give up.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like proof that you don't always have to succumb to the grimdark.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, can they actually pull it off?
Yeah.
Can being practical and having awesome tech be enough to survive in this crazy universe?
That's the big question, and one we've been kind of dancing around all episode.
We have.
But before we get to that,
Yeah.
I want to talk tabletop tactics.
Okay, let's do it.
We've touched on their strengths and weaknesses,
Right.
but what are the actual units and strategies that make the Tau work on the battlefield?
Well, we talked about marker lights being key.
Oh, yeah.
And they're more than just accuracy buffs. It's about this whole network of information.
Yeah.
Think of it like this. Each marker light hit gives the Tau a clearer picture of the battlefield.
Okay, yeah.
So they can coordinate their firepower with insane precision.
So it's not just about individual shots. It's like they're building a whole targeting system that the whole army can use.
Exactly. And on the tabletop, that can be devastating. Imagine facing a Tau army where every shot is perfectly placed, hitting your weakest points.
Oof. I would not want to be on the receiving end of that.
Nope. But this reliance on marker lights, it also makes them vulnerable.
Right, take out the marker lights and their attack power drops.
Big time. So you got to protect those units no matter what.
Makes sense. Which brings us back to specific units.
Okay.
We've mentioned the hammerhead and the railgun, of course.
Classics.
But are there any other units that really showcase this dance between firepower and fragility?
Oh, for sure. The Pathfinder team is a great example.
Okay, Pathfinders, those are the scout guys, right?
Yeah, they're recon specialists, highly mobile, and they've got all these fancy sensors.
Enemy eyes and ears of the army.
Exactly. They scout ahead, find the important targets, and lay down marker lights for the big guns to follow up on.
So they're not frontline fighters, but they're crucial to how the Tau operate.
Absolutely. They're setting the stage for the rest of the army to do its thing. And then you have units like the Broadside Battlesuit. This is a heavy weapons platform, all about long-range firepower. It's slow, but it hits like a meteor, especially with a bunch of marker lights guiding its shots.
So you've got the fast Pathfinders painting targets, and then the slow but powerful broadsides just erasing them from existence.
Pretty much. A cool combo of speed and raw firepower.
It is. But what about when things DO get up close and personal? Do the Tau have anything that can handle that?
Well, for the Tau themselves, melee is still a bit of a weak spot. But there are some interesting options among their battlesuits. The Crisis Battlesuit, for example, is super customizable.
Like a Swiss Army knife battlesuit.
Exactly. You can equip it for all sorts of situations, even close combat. With the right gear, a Crisis Battlesuit can actually hold its own in a brawl. But let's not forget their allies.
Right, the Kroot. Still love that they evolve based on what they eat.
Yeah, it's wild.
Shame they aren't as well supported in the game as some of the other Tau units.
Yeah, it's a balancing act. They add tactical options, but they're not as powerful as the core Tau stuff.
It's all about finding the right mix, right? Weighing those pros and cons.
Exactly.
Speaking of cons, we've talked a lot about the challenges they face in the lore.
Yeah, the Imperium, Chaos, the Tyranids.
Does that carry over to the tabletop? Are the Taus inherently an underdog faction?
That's a great question, and it gets to the heart of what makes them so cool. On paper, they've got it all. Great tech, smart tactics, a solid roster of units, but in practice, they can struggle against some of the really elite armies out there.
So they have the potential to be top tier, but it takes a skilled player to make them work.
Exactly. They need a more nuanced strategic approach. You can't just brute force your way to victory. You got to outsmart your opponent, find their weaknesses, and make the most of that marker light network.
It sounds like a challenge, but a fun one.
It is.
It's almost poetic, you know? Even on the tabletop, the Taus are fighting against the odds, trying to make something better in a universe that seems determined to crush them.
It's that spirit, that refusal to give in, that makes them so compelling. They remind us that even in the darkest places, there's still room for hope, for progress. And that's what makes the Tau Empire one of the most fascinating factions in Warhammer 40K, in my opinion.
Well said. So there you have it, listeners, the Tau Empire. High-tech, surprisingly idealistic, and facing impossible odds in a galaxy that's always at war. We've talked about their history, their philosophy, their military might, and their unique place in the Warhammer 40K tabletop game.
And that big question still hangs in the air. Can they actually make it? Will their faith in the greater good and all their cool technology be enough to overcome Chaos, the Tyranids, and the Imperium?
Only time will tell. But one thing's for sure, their story is far from over. They'll keep fighting for their place in the galaxy, trying to build a better future, one pulse rifle shot at a time.
And hey, maybe, just maybe, their optimistic view of things, it'll actually win out in the end, against all odds.
You can hope. Until next time, may your battle suits be strong and your marker lights true.